Today is, believe it or not, Holy Spaces Part 7. That seems to be what Bamidbar is, to me, is a very clear picture of how to live in the holy spaces. And I guess if there has to be a subtitle, it's The Red Heifer, No Real Mystery. I'll have to confess, some weeks ago when I realized that my teaching was going to fall on the week of the red heifer, I was a little distressed because I really didn't understand that much about the red heifer. I know that the rabbis say it's a mystery. It's an unsolvable mystery that's not going to be solved until Messiah comes. And possibly for them that might be true. And I've also heard a lot of Christians try to teach on the red heifer, but they have no Torah. They have no foundation for what they're teaching, so it's a little slippery and all spiritual, but how do you really understand it without the foundation of the Torah? And so I was praying and I was like, Father, how can I even begin to hope to understand something that's way over the rabbis' heads? You know, how can I even begin to explain something even Christian ministers really don't understand because they are without Torah, or they're with only fragments of the Torah as they choose? How can I even hope to understand? And is it asking too much for you to show me what the mystery of the red heifer is? And I'm thinking, who am I? You know, but I had this real thing about standing up here and admitting I had no clue what it really meant. I understand some of the symbols maybe, but to admit to you guys that I didn't understand it, I was a little concerned about that. But I've got good news for you. The Father loves you so much, He wasn't going to let me do that. And so little by little over the past few weeks, He has helped me to understand what this red heifer is all about. And it's not stopped. It's continued. It's almost been a continuous thing even in my sleep. I'm finding things out. I'm understanding things. I'll wake up in the morning and it's still there. Everywhere I go, my mind has been on it. And even just sitting here in service today, listening to the songs, listening to some of the things that people have said, it's still connecting. It's like it's just still rolling. And that's good, because there's so many more things than I have in these few pages. And so when 30 minutes are up, if you want me to stop, I'll stop. But if you want me to finish it, I'll finish it. We'll do it that way. But even beyond this, there's so much stuff that's just still coming, and I hope I'm able to write it all down. I've got a whole nother message just on the burning part. The burning is death and so forth, and what that means, things that are new to me. So, and then I'm beginning to get things about the red, the color red mixed with the color white, and what that means, and how the mother's blood is transformed into milk for an infant. How the red turned to the white becomes health. It becomes nutritious and so forth. And the pictures, they're just endless. And maybe that's why there's a fascination. Have you ever noticed how many websites there are that just examine the red heifer? They're monitoring, is there a perfectly red heifer that's been born, that's going to be able to be offered for the purification of this next temple that's going to be built? There's people selling books and tapes. They're making a fortune off of this red heifer. And I'm not sure they really understand the height and the depth and the breadth of what Yeshua did and what He's trying to explain to us through the mystery of the red heifer. But I think we might be making an error. We're looking for a cow. That's not what we should be looking for. We're looking for the wrong thing. I think we should quit looking for a cow, because I think the work has already been done, and that work is being extended. And I'll show you that too, why it's not complete. The third day and the seventh day, why there had to be 2 different days of cleansing, or you still weren't clean. You cannot just take that third day cleansing. Yeshua was resurrected on the third day, and many, many people take that water of cleansing as their salvation, right? You have to be cleansed on 2 days. The third day and the seventh day. And if you don't understand the red heifer, then you may not be prepared for what's going to happen to you or not happen to you on that seventh day of Sabbath rest. And that's one thing we're doing here today, observing the Sabbath as a picture, figuratively speaking, prophetically speaking. We're saying, sprinkle us with that second sprinkling on the seventh day, on the Sabbath day, because we want to be completely clean. We don't want to have a clean robe and dirty underwear, right? We want it all clean. So, nothing wrong with saying it's a mystery, because there's certain aspects of it I think that still are. The rabbis call it a chukah, or a chuk, and that means that it is a decree for which we are not given a complete explanation. It's a commandment you accept by logic, or that's illogical. What you accept by logic is called a mishpat, or a judgment. It makes perfect sense not to kill people, right? This is a chukah. It means I don't completely understand it, but I'm going to do it by faith. This is the secret to understanding. What else do we accept simply by faith? That's how you first believed on Yeshua, right? That's how you're going to have to accept this red heifer, completely in faith. It's not logical, exactly, to believe in Yeshua as the Messiah, is it? How can one man die for the sins of every... You had to accept part of that by faith. But He's giving you the Torah, and He's given you the prophets. He's given you the Psalms. He's even given you the Brit Chadashah to help you begin to apply logical principles to this chukah. There's parts of this that you can't understand. But how many of you still have trouble seeing Yeshua in all of the Torah and all of the prophets and all of the Psalms? It's still a little fuzzy. Hard to see it sometimes, especially when you're dealing with red heifers and golden calves and so forth. But that's the key. We accepted Messiah by faith alone. The rabbis say we have to accept the red heifer by faith alone and simply do it. Because to accept Messiah, to hear ye Him, is to accept Him without a completely rational explanation. Parts of it you understand, and part of it is because He gave you a measure of faith to just believe it, no matter what. But we do have the Torah, we do have the prophets to help us begin to understand logically, and they are going to help us progressively learn more about the Messiah, to learn more about things like the prophecy of the red heifer. If you want to understand her, you need to understand three main goals of the red heifer. There is only one purpose for the red heifer, just one. But in order to understand that purpose, you're going to have to understand the three goals of offering the red heifer. And those three goals are to help you understand the first and second Adam. The second is to make sure that you understand that the realm of death separates us from the holy spaces. And the third goal is for you to understand that there is resurrection from death. The Gibor that we do in the Shmoneh Esrei, Thou art mighty, O Lord, forever. When you're praying that, the mystery of the red heifer is embodied in that prayer, because it's all about resurrection from the dead. So today you're going to understand the first and the second Adam. You're going to understand that the realm of death is what is separating you from holy spaces, if you are separated. And number three, that there is a resurrection, a dramatic resurrection from that death. Like Elder Robinson said, you might be a dead man walking, and that might need to be resurrected. You might be alive and yet need resurrection. The thing I think that helped me understand the red heifer was in school. I had to respond and write an essay, respond to a quote. And that quote was, either you live in Adam or you live in Christ. There's no other way. Think about that. Either you live in Adam or you live in Christ. There's no other way. You are either alive in Christ or you are a dead man. You are a dead Adam walking. And I had to respond to that. And as I began to respond to that quote in my essay, that's when all these things started pouring out, because I began to understand the first and second Adam. So let's start with the creation, so you can see that there's a clear connection with those three goals. Elohim first created the eretz, or the earth. There's another word for earth, and that word is Adamah. Adamah. Adamah is that from which the first Adam, or man, named Adam, was created. Does that make sense? The earth is the Adamah. He takes from the earth, and he forms a Adam, and he names this Adam. Very good. Now, Adamah, the earth from which Adam was taken, is a feminine noun, right? When you hear that ah on the end, you know it's feminine. Now do you understand where all these pagan religions get the concept of Mother Earth? They have an ancient cultural memory of truth, warped over time, but an ancient cultural memory. And you know what? It's being revived in our generation. There is a huge Mother Earth cult. Okay? Whether you're talking about New Age or some of this Wiccan stuff, it's all about Mother Earth. Here's the problem. The Adamah that Adam was taken from is a created substance. It's not God. You don't worship the created. You worship the Creator. And that is why Mother Earth will never qualify for worship. If you're worshiping Mother Earth, then you're repeating a 6,000 and something year old mistake. We don't worship the earth, or Mother Earth, if you want to call her that. But that's where that concept comes from. And in a sense, and even Paul kind of refers to this when he says, the woman is taken out of the man, nevertheless the man is taken out of the woman. There's a whole mystical thing there with, yes, the man is taken out of the earth. Adamah, Adam from Adamah. But then we have Isha from the Ish. But the earth is our mother in a sense, not in a sense of worship, but this is the Adamah from which we were formed. However, this first man is not just earthy. He's not just Adamah. He has something inside of him called blood. What is the Hebrew word for blood? Dam. If you add the Aleph, or the first letter of Elohim, okay, I want you to picture in your mind. I don't have PowerPoint today and I don't have the chalkboard. I want you to picture the Hebrew name Adam spelled out in Hebrew. Aleph, Dalet, Mem Sofit. Picture that in your mind. Now the Aleph, I see some of you writing, if you're looking at the Aleph, you know that the Aleph is the first letter of Elohim, the Creator. Now, who said he was the Aleph and the Tav? Yeshua. So Yeshua said, I am the Aleph. I am the Creator. And it was by the Word that the worlds and we were created, right? By the Word, by Yeshua, by Elohim, the Word of creation. If we add Aleph to Dam, Dalet Mem, Sofit, for blood, we have God blood. We have Creator blood. We have Yeshua blood. The first Adam had Yeshua blood. That is how he was created, with Yeshua in him. We've had a lot of discussion recently on whether Yeshua was divinity. That's not the question. What was he? He was the Aleph and the Tav of creation. He was the Word by which we were formed. So Adam is Yeshua blood. Now, Adam, also means not just man, but it means singular man. There is no plural for Adam. Just like in English we say man, we mean all mankind, right? That's lots of people. Nevertheless, we're using a singular noun to refer to all the people. Same thing in Hebrew. It's Adam, simply Adam. There is only one man. There's only one. Just like there was only one seed. Not unto seeds as many, but unto seed, Yeshua, the seed. There is only one man. And this is why it's so important for us to understand when Yeshua says, love your neighbor as yourself, because it is like the most important commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. What is he saying? As God is one, man is one. And so when you love man, when you love Adam, you love that Yeshua blood that they were created with. If you do not love your neighbor, then you do not love Yeshua. Because then you have separated the Aleph from the Adam, and all that's left is blood, and you will hate one another. What's the result of hate? Blood. So you must love your neighbor, or you have lost Yeshua. You've thrown him away. You've cut him off and said, I prefer blood to being a man. Because without Yeshua, you're not even a man. You're something else. The one man was created with Yeshua blood. Even though now we've got a lot of people living in Adam blood, don't we? They don't live with the blood of Yeshua in them. The first Adam was both earthy, from the Adamah, from which he was formed, but he had Yeshua blood in him. And so we can say figuratively the first Adam was Yeshua blood. And that's going to make sense later when we talk again about the garden and what Miriam saw. Why she saw two Yeshuas. The red heifer is called the para, which is heifer. Aduma. Aduma means red. It's the same root word. Adom, red. Aduma, feminine red. Same word as Adam, man. Adam, the man, Adam. So the color red refers to the color of blood, right? Para, aduma. It says she has to be completely aduma, completely red. No white hairs, no black hairs, no gray hairs, completely covered in red, completely covered in blood. Nothing without blood covering it. It's the color, dam. Now in the garden is where the first Adam, the first man, sinned, right? And he was given skin garments of blood without Yeshua. Skin garments of blood without Yeshua. These garments were the result of death, not of life. And to Adam in the spiritual sense, these animals died in his place. So what's happening here is Adam has lost his Yeshua blood. And see what happens when you shed Yeshua? Blood has to flow. These animals give their blood in order to cover him because he's lost something. He now realizes he's naked. According to Paul's letter to the Corinthians, Adam's glorious garden clothes were immortality. We talk about how much light Adam and Chava had. They shone forth the glory of God. He says these things were immortality. And if you want me to make copies of this later, I've got all the scriptures footnoted. And he says that we also groan and desire to be clothed as the first Adam before he tumbled into the realm of sin and death. We groan and we desire to be once again clothed with glory and immortality. He says this in 2 Corinthians 5, 1 through 4. But for now, we are still clothed in the nakedness of mortality, because you will die if enough blood is shed. You have on you clothes of mortality. Things like this. That is what is on you. It's a physical death that we are subject to. As long as we're still wearing clothes, we are signifying that we are subject to physical death. Now, I don't know what you say about people that run around naked for fun, but it might be that they don't even have sense enough to know that they will die, and they will have to give an account to their Creator for walking around without both their physical clothes and their spiritual clothes. But Even though we are clothed in the nakedness of mortality, a physical death, that mortality will be cleansed from us by the sprinkling of that heifer water on the seventh day. We will put off mortality, and we will take on immortality. Now in the second garden, remember Adam has ruptured out. The earthquakes, remember that? He gets driven out of the Garden of Eden. It's a holy place. It's a clean place. Death cannot be in a clean place. And so it vomits him out and says you can never go back. Not while you're still clothed in mortality. And I'm going to put 2 cherubim right here with flaming swords to make sure you don't try to get back in there and impart death to a holy realm. You go back out here, you have just polluted the Adamah from which you were made. So when Adam is pushed out from the Garden of Eden, he's pushed out into the earth, right? What he has just done is impart the realm of death all over the earth. He's contaminated the entire earth with uncleanness, with death. And it's become now subject to death. Whereas he did uphold it with the word of truth, the Yeshua blood that was in him was what was holding the whole thing together in a good state, right? He separates Yeshua blood from him. He goes out into the earth, and man without Yeshua is blood, and now the animals begin to turn on one another. They begin to shed blood. Everything turns wrong because the first Adam in that first garden ruptured out of a holy space. In the second garden, Gethsemane, the second Adam began to sweat the Yeshua blood that over a 3-day period would purify mankind. It said that he sweat great drops of blood, right? What does sweat do when you sweat? What does it do for your body? Cleanses it. It cleans you out, right? It gets the impurity. So you want to sweat. You want to get the impurity out of your body. And that's what Yeshua began to do, because we are the body, right? And it says that we are in him. Yeshua was all of us. And he began to sweat these great drops of dung in order to purify us. He first had to purify in that garden, revisiting the garden in order to purify us. If we are in him, it had to happen. In the third garden, the second Adam was resurrected from that realm of death. He was the Yehoshua of Zechariah 3 that we read. A lot of people don't see that. They say, how can Yeshua have on dirty clothes? He's the Son of God, right? Think about the red heifer now. Yehoshua has on filthy garments, but they're removed from him in the presence of God. With Satan standing right there accusing him, he says, no. By the power of your life, I'm taking away these unclean clothes. Did those unclean clothes mean he had sinned? No. Because there's 2 ways you can receive uncleanness. One is sin. But we know that wasn't the case with him, right? The second way is to touch death. To come into contact with it. Did Yeshua contact death for us? Absolutely he did. And he took our uncleanness, our death realm, he took on himself. But there's good news. He was the Yehoshua, and we can see that in that 3-day period we can get a glimpse into the heavens because of Zechariah, and we can see exactly what was happening in that 3 days. That realm of death could not hold him. His life was holy. Can the holy exist in the unholy? The holy cannot exist in the unholy any more than the... You see how it works backward? The earthquakes go in and out. It's 30 minutes. You want me to stop? Okay. Holy things will not permit the unholy to stay in them. They will eventually vomit out when the measure of iniquity is full, right? The unholy cannot exist. The holy cannot exist in the unholy. Death is unholy. He couldn't stay there. And so he goes down there, he conquers death, he takes the keys, and he goes back to the Father, and he's still got these dirty grave clothes on him. Does the Father reject him, or does he exalt him? He exalts him. He gives him the clean clothes. He is the high priest exalted before us. He has put on immortality in that grave to lead Adam, mankind, to resurrection. He has been given access to the heavenly throne. The accusations do not affect him one bit. And because of this, all things have been made subject to him because of the power of his Torah life. Everything is subject to him. It's in the 20th chapter of John that we read that there's a strange account of two Yeshuas. Avi showed us that the first time, and it's interesting. Why were there two Yeshuas after the resurrection? The first Yeshua that Miriam is speaking to, it says she supposes is the gardener. Who is the gardener? Adam. The first Adam was placed in the garden to tend it. But he lost the authority. But now, there's another Yeshua standing there with him, opposite him. She's talking to one Yeshua, and then the text says that Yeshua says, Miriam, and she turns around, Yeshua. Who's this? Who's the gardener? Think again about who that first Adam was. Why are there two Yeshuas? There are those who were still dead in that first Adam, who put away the Yeshua blood from him. The second Adam, though, has redeemed that earthy Adam. The second Adam is restoring his access to the holy spaces. He has restored the Yeshua blood to the first Adam. He has resurrected Adam with him, with his blood. You think the first Adam turned it down? He knew he lost his vision of Yeshua, and he knew what it would take to regain it. It would take the power of a sinless life for him to ever regain the Yeshua blood. There's the first Adam who's been resurrected from the earth, and there is the second Adam. Therefore, because he has taken back on the Yeshua blood that he had at the beginning, he is called Yeshua in chapter 20. So what about this red heifer? What is she? Who is she? Or who is he? Is it male or is it female? Is it really the Messiah? Was the Messiah female? He wasn't female, but he had some female attributes. And who is this clean man that gathers up the ashes? Is maybe the Messiah rather the Cohen who escorts this red heifer out and throws in the scarlet stuff and the hyssop and the cedar and then cleanses himself and goes back to the tabernacle? Who is this red heifer? Well, there's a real temptation here to take figures and to make them into a theology, because theology attempts to transform your behavior. You can get a little carried away sometimes, because understanding the red heifer, I don't know that it will change your life, but it might help you understand why your life is changing. Does that make sense? I don't know that this will change, just understanding will change anything, but it might help you understand the change that's happening to you. So let's be real careful when we deal with figures, because often in the Brit Chadashah, the writers will say, we're speaking figuratively. What about this red heifer? I think it's logical to say that the Cohen who escorted the red heifer out for the burning was indeed a picture of the clean priest that Messiah was to us, because through his service to us, he became unclean on our behalf. He took those dirty clothes on our behalf. And remember what I said, being unclean does not mean you sinned. It means that you were born into a world of sin. It means that you've contacted a realm of death. There's been a direct contact with the realm of death. It says then that the Kohen had to immerse himself and his clothes before he could return to the tabernacle. And we see this in Yeshua's admonition to Miriam. He says, don't touch me. I've not yet ascended to the Father. There's still a thing that I have to go do in this heavenly tabernacle, and I don't want a corpse touching me. You're thinking, why are you calling her a corpse? She's a dead woman. She's a dead woman walking. You see, Yeshua had put off the death clothes. In fact, the Father said, take them off of him. Remember the vision of Yehoshua? Those grave clothes have been removed from him, and they're sitting there lying in the grave. What is that? That is to symbolize to you that the second Adam, Yeshua, has put off mortality. He has put off the first Adam, the earthy man, and he has been resurrected to life, a living spirit. He has left what was dead in the grave of hell, even though some of us continue to walk around in our grave clothes. But now he must return to the Father, and he cannot touch the corpse of a man living in a tent. Thinking, what tent? Remember, the holy water of the red heifer was specifically for someone who had touched the corpse of a man in a tent. There was something about the covering of a tent that rendered you unclean when you touched this corpse. Now the scripture is very clear in Isaiah 40:22, that the Father sits above the circle of the earth, and they thought the world was flat. It says he sits above the circle of the earth. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. So what is over this earth? A tent. And what are we? Corpses, living under a tent. Some of us are corpses. Some of us are not. Some of us are alive. What the first Adam ruptured in that holy space of the garden when he was driven out and imparted that entire realm of death to the Adamah, Yeshua came to fix that. Not only did he come to put the Yeshua blood back into man, back into Adam, he came to restore truth to Adam. How do we know that? Well, remember, the key is the Aleph, the Yeshua blood. We have the word emet, which is truth, right? The spirit of truth. You shall worship me in spirit and in truth. Emet. But remember, the first Adam took the Aleph out and said, this is not necessary. I'm losing my vision of Yeshua. I'm left with this. What is this word? Death. Met. Met is death. Without Yeshua blood in your life, you are dead. There is no truth in you because you're dead. It is only with Yeshua blood that you can understand or worship in emet, truth. You're one letter short of death, or you're one letter short of life. Depends on which end you're coming at it from. It was that word of truth, that word of emet, that upheld the creation in its good state. But without him, Adam, mankind, was a dead man walking. He's a corpse in the tent of this earth. And we are still imparting death to the Adamah. That's why creation is groaning and crying out. Get rid of these Yeshua-less people. And we want Yeshua. Bring him back. The stones would have cried out. Because what were they before we knew them as rocks? There's no telling what they were like with the Aleph in Emet. There's no telling what they were like when the Aleph was in Adam, when we were men. They're groaning for that return. Remember when Yeshua said, let the dead bury the dead? The man was alive. But he's saying there were dead people who will bury this dead man. Let the dead bury the dead. This is exactly what happened to those rebels that stood against Moshe and Aharon. The dead buried the dead. Remember it says they stood defiantly at the doorways of their tents. And he says, okay, if they die a natural death, then God's not with me. But if the earth, if the Adamah, if it just opens up and they fall alive into the pit of hell, into the grave, then God is with me. The dead Adamah opened up and it buried the living dead and closed back up. That's what awaits us if we do not have the blood of Yeshua. It will swallow us up in death instead of us being swallowed in victory through Yeshua. They rejected the Yeshua blood. Remember me telling you they had lost their vision of Yeshua? You say, how can the spirit of prophecy is the spirit of Yeshua? They lost that. There was an earthquake. There was a realm quake because they could not continue in a holy camp living in that state of death. They were too far gone. There was no resurrection for them. What was unholy had tried to live in a holy space. By the same token, when Yeshua goes down to the grave, there must be a resurrection. He went outside the camp for all of us. But can he stay out there if he is holy? Or will the earthquakes begin to push him back in toward the holier spaces? That's exactly what happened when he hung on the cross. Remember the earthquakes? And even the unbelievers said, surely this must be the Son of God. Even a Roman centurion could see that this realm quake was the result of a holy life. An unholy place could not hold him. We too live in this tent with corpses who have had their vision of Yeshua either never developed or they've lost this vision so that they may live in the truth, in the emet. They live in met, but we live in emet. Yeshua is our great high priest. He officiates the service of the heifer, and he is the priest who took uncleanness upon himself in order to produce something pure. Now here's what's interesting. Even the Jewish sages at least understand this much. Monk says the Cohen who mixed the water of purification became contaminated as if he had taken on the evil of the wicked nations in order to convert it to goodness. That's an awesome insight, and they don't see Yeshua. They don't identify Yeshua as we do, but they understand that the Cohen who's mixing this holy water is taking evil, is taking uncleanness upon himself in order to bring forth goodness, to convert it to goodness. Evil is necessary as a means to provide that conversion to goodness. And that's why Yeshua had to come. There was no other way to convert it. Ramban says, all the purity in Israel depends on the Cohen. However, in Messianic times, Hashem himself will sprinkle pure waters over us and purify us, for the last para adumah will be that of the Messiah. The rabbis understand that this heifer is the Messiah. He is both the Cohen, officiating the service, and he is the heifer. Both symbols, one a pure Cohen and the other the heifer, of a symbol of a coming Messiah. One who takes contamination in order to change it to goodness, and one the Messiah who is the offering of the Holy One, from which the ashes are taken to make the clean water that purifies us from death. And I think that's a great interpretation, even though they don't understand who Yeshua is. The red heifer is the first Adam, completely red, completely covered in sin. A para adumah. You know what a pariah is? Complete outcast from society. Where do you think that came from? Para adumah, the red heifer. In English we call a pariah someone who's unaccepted and cast out. He became the outcast for us. He became rejected for us. Our Messiah was rejected of Adam, of mankind. He was completely covered with our sin. He took up the crossbeam. Y'all want to make a bet whether it was made out of cedar? He took the scarlet robe. He had all kinds of red, crimson stuff that blended with the blood of his body. He took the vinegar on the hyssop reed. Remember, they held the vinegar to him. He took the essentials upon himself. He threw those things into the fire of death and said, burn them with me. Because there must be cedar, there must be crimson stuff, and there must be hyssop in order for this purging to take place. And it all burned with him. He threw it right into the fire. He took it upon himself. 3 essential ingredients in burning that heifer. Our Messiah was the red heifer only, in that what was purged was from him was the flesh of the first Adam. What was earthy was burned out of him. Once that first Adam was completely purged, what was left was the stuff of cleansing from the realm of death. Dust and ashes. According to the Torah, clean men were to remove those ashes, right? And then they incurred uncleanness in the removing, and then they again had to immerse. Just to show you that the Torah cannot be broken, and that He will always provide 2 or 3 witnesses to uphold His word. Tell me who the 2 clean men were in Yeshua's day, who took Him from the cross. Remember? Joseph of Arimathea, and Nicodemus. Not just one clean man. His father said, give them 2 so they will have no doubt. And what's interesting is Joseph from Arimathea comes from a mountain in Ephraim. 2 brothers in the faith, taking the Messiah, and they're going to put His body into a grave. They are gathering the ashes of the burning, and together they place it in the grave. They rendered themselves unclean for the Passover, didn't they? You know, the religious leaders didn't want to be unclean. And they wouldn't go into the house where Pilate was, because they didn't want to touch a Gentile. But it didn't bother Yeshua to touch a Gentile, because their uncleanness had no effect over Him. He wanted it. He said, touch me. Go ahead and touch me. Let me take your uncleanness. Put it on me, because I know how to take it off. It's like the scapegoat at Yom Kippur. A clean man has to take that scapegoat out and turn it loose. But then he's unclean, and he has to wash his clothes before he comes back into the camp. We have to be very, very careful if we lead an unrepentant sinner out of the camp. We need to immerse. We need to remember that there's a status change. Once you get it on you, you need to immerse, to purify afterward, because we've touched a corpse. We've touched something that tried to live in a holy realm that didn't belong there. It was the first Adam that was burned on the stake, but it was the second Adam that resurrected. The red heifer is the first Adam, and its ashes and its water cleansed the flesh of what is earthy, the appetites of our earthly souls. This bundle of appetites we've talked about, it was cleansing for that. And for this reason it says the heifer has never borne a yoke. What is the yoke? The yoke of the kingdom. She's got her stiff, untrained neck. She will not accept the commandments of God. She will not accept the kingdom, but this is burned up. And afterwards, she is ready to take on that easy yoke that Yeshua talked about, of His kingdom. And we have to offer our own untrained wild necks for burning and to take on the yoke of the kingdom. We have to take on the yoke of Yeshua blood, the second Adam, to sacrifice for the kingdom. We can build and serve kingdoms of golden calves, or we can suffer the red heifer inside of us to be burned and to take on an easy yoke. There's nothing in the middle. There's the first Adam or there's the second Adam. In the Talmud, Berachot 64b, it teaches that the Torah will endure only with those who kill themselves for it. Does that mean take your own life? No. Just what Yeshua said. You must give up your life. You must take up your cross to follow Him. You must kill yourself, not yourself, yourself, in order for the Torah to endure. That means you have to give up the first Adam that you're living in and take on the second Adam. And in order for that to happen, the heifer has to die. It has to die. You've got to crucify it. Put it to death. Crucify the flesh, the first Adam. And then you have to take the second Adam's ashes in the water. And you have to sprinkle. And what is that? It's the word. It's the washing of water by the word. He said, see, I've made you clean by the word that I've spoken to you. Every day. You can't afford to let a day go by without sprinkling yourself with this water of the word. It's the only thing between you and being dead. Being a dead man walking around, because you're touching it. Every day you're touching the realm of death. The people around you are dead. There's even people in your family who are dead, yet alive. And you have to keep sprinkling that water on you so that they can see you're alive. If you look like a first Adam, how will they know there's a second Adam? They have to tell a difference between them and you. And that's why the writers of the Brit Chadashah keep saying, if you're sinning, if you go on sinning, once you've come to the knowledge of Yeshua, you're crucifying Him over and over and over and over to yourself. That's exactly what it says. You're crucifying Him to yourself. What is yourself? Your first Adam. Your red heifer. You're not crucifying that soul and flesh and becoming a living spirit with the second Adam. We have to make ourselves clean with His words. You might live in a tent with corpses, but you can apply the clean water of His word because He was resurrected on the third day. You can take that water and it's good. You have to purify on the third day. But you can't stop. The seventh day sprinkling is what we're still looking forward to when our flesh itself will be transformed. You see, Yeshua wasn't a little ghosty. He wasn't just a spirit. He said, touch me. Handle me. Let's have some fish. You have anything to eat, children? He could eat. They could touch Him. Because His first Adam, His flesh, had been resurrected to the form that it was. Remember Him being transfigured in the radiance? He had begun to put on immortality through obedience. You can also begin to be transfigured and transformed. You can begin to put on immortality even before the seventh day through obedience. That's how you begin. Remember the holy ones of old. It says in the earthquakes and all the things that are happening at the crucifixion. They resurrected from the dead. The holy ones, not the sinful ones. The holy ones of old, it says, resurrected, and they walked around the streets of Jerusalem. It says they appeared to many. They testified. What was that? There was a part of them that could not be completely transformed and resurrected until Yeshua burned with the cedar and the hyssop and the scarlet stuff. That's what they were waiting for. And don't you know they were happy to see Him? And don't you know they had something to tell? How would you like to be one of the ones they appeared to? They could prophesy, let me tell you. They could tell you what has been, what is, and what will be. Because they had seen it. They had Yeshua blood in them in a respect when they were alive because they were holy, it says. They were crucifying the flesh as well as they knew how. And they were cleansed in the flesh, the writer of Hebrews says, with the ashes of the red heifer. But there was still yet a resurrection they had to wait for. There was more fullness of that Yeshua blood that they had to wait for. Do you remember what was missing from Yeshua's flesh? The holes. What went in the holes? Nails. What do nails mean? In Hebrew, the letter Vav, or the number 6, is the number of a man, right? What was missing from Yeshua? The first Adam. Man, the earthy man, the nail holes. That was no longer part of Him. He had a resurrected flesh. What was earthy was gone. And all resurrected flesh shall worship him. The grave cannot possess your holy flesh. Because of the Dam that restored us to Adam. You, Israel, you are men. Isn't that what the prophet says? You are Adam. You're men. You are man, singular, because you're in Yeshua. It cannot possess you and hold you down there. There's going to be a realm quake that brings you back to life. So our Messiah Yeshua, he is the high priest. He is the red heifer. He's assisted by friends, Yosef and Nicodemus. Why do we say friends? Because Abraham was called the friend of God. And he was the first man to say, behold, I am but dust and ashes. But they were faithful to collect the dust and ashes of our Yeshua, and may their memories be blessed for taking the uncleanness of death upon themselves, so that they would have to observe the Passover later. But they gave that sacrifice of themselves to collect the dust and ashes and to put it in the grave, because they knew something greater was coming. Bless their memory. We also live in a tent with corpses of dead men walking. We have purified, hopefully, everyone in here has purified yourself with the water of Messiah on the third day, the day of his resurrection. But what about the seventh day? If you've not accepted the third day water, you need to. You need to do it today. Because there's 2 days of purification. And how will you ever go back on the seventh day? It says you can't. Your uncleanness remains upon you. You cannot on the seventh day accept a sprinkling if you miss the third. That's the completion. You have to be purified on that Sabbath rest that remains for the people of God. Although we live in a time of the renewed covenant, the Torah written on our hearts, we still don't see the fullness, do we? It says in Hebrews, we do not yet see all things subjected to him. Even though the work has been done, there's a waiting period between the third and the seventh day. It says we don't yet see all things subjected, because it says death is the last to be conquered, right? Nevertheless, this red heifer is a chukkat. And chok, the root of that word, is the root word that means engraving. To engrave something deeply. Yes, the Torah is written on our hearts, but I don't think it's engraved there yet. Because the engraving that Ezekiel talks about is an engraving on our hearts. It's a fleshy heart that will prevent us from turning back to unclean and abominable things. How many of you have ever turned back to an abominable thing once you received salvation on the third day? Some of you lived. I lived in abominable and unclean things. So it's here now, but not yet. There's still an engraving yet to occur, and that's why it's necessary on the third and seventh day. But it's already begun. Remember, uncleanness is brought to you in one of 2 ways. Sin and transgression, you should be putting that away with the first Adam. Or contact with death. Let me tell you, there's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck here. You can accept your salvation. You can be cleansed on the third day, but there's nothing you can do about this tent you're living in, because this is where you're walking, and you're going to have to touch dead people. Abominable things. This purification will be completed on the seventh day when we enter into his rest. And that's our vision. That's the Yeshua blood that must remain in you. Keep your eyes on the goal. Keep your eyes on the seventh day rest. Because that cleansing is a time when a pure Kohen will once again sprinkle clean water on you. And it shouldn't be so hard as it is now. It's hard now, isn't it? It's hard to even know what's unclean sometimes. Don't we get in these big long discussions about, oh, if you only read the Mishnah, the third remove and the fourth remove of uncleanness, and if you touch this and this touch that and this touch that and this touch that, is this thing down here unclean? You can spend all day talking about what is clean and unclean. There's nothing you can do about living in a world of death except continue sprinkling with the water of the Word. But notice something, the word Cohen, or if you have a Hebrew Bible, and the word pure in this passage are both mentioned 7 times. The completion will come on the 7th day. We can't lose sight of that day. You know what the rabbis believe? That this red heifer was an atonement for the golden calf. And they believed that when Yisrael at Sinai accepted the covenant and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, that the curse of death was suspended from over them.